Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second allocation workshop titled Ask the Experts. Here are your experts. We are really excited about today's presentations. Just a couple housekeeping items. The restrooms are not open over here. You're going to have to walk around and go to the larger ones to your right or to your left. Please hold your Q&A to the end. Q&A cards are the blue cards in your packets. You can fill those out. We will have the opportunity to ask live Q&A, but this is being recorded. So for audio purposes, we do ask that you try to fill them out, but we will leave a few minutes for live. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch workshop number 1, that is on our YouTube page and website. These are all meant to build on one another, so going back and watching that even after this workshop is still going to be very helpful to your knowledge and understanding of the allocation. All handouts will be available on the allocation page, and you also will find your key terms and definitions. So with that, we'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. First, we have Aubrey Moritzen. She is an attorney with Riddell, Bixler, Moritzen, Evans, Fox, and Buss LLP. She is the legal counsel for the GSA. You do have the Meet the Speakers handout, so you can read more about each speaker. Next, we have Kevin Johansson. He is a technical consultant for the GSA and a principal engineer with Provo and Pritchard. After that, we have Ronnie Samuelian. He is the King Subbasin point of contact and the president of Provo and Pritchard. And then we have Justin Mendez. He is the general manager of North Fort Kings GSA. And last, Joel Kimmelshoe, Land IQ principal, and Land IQ is a key tool in the allocation. So our agenda today, obviously you get to hear from me right now, and then we'll have our topical presentations, defining the buckets, what goes in those buckets, the allocation number, a grower's path forward, precip and allocation, or in Land IQ, and then we'll do the Q&A. Like I said, please write those questions down. When we get to the outreach presentation, there will be some staff members along the side to go ahead and gather those from you. So, understanding what an allocation is, it is extremely important. We went over it in workshop number 1, but I just want to turn your attention to the screen. Again, this is in your key terms and definitions, but we just wanted to reiterate what an allocation is. In the context of SGMA, an allocation is a set amount of groundwater that is allotted or allowed to be pumped by landowners on a per acre basis each year to maintain sustainable conditions. So the projected timeline to an allocation: in February of 2025, the King Subbasin began a water accounting framework. And then over the irrigation season of 2025, we did a pilot with Reed Ditch. You'll hear more about that from our general manager, Justin Mendez. And then in the 2026 irrigation season, which is water year 2026, we'll be doing a GSA-wide pilot. And then finally, in 2027, the irrigation season will begin the allocation enforcement. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Aubrey.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Aubrey Moritzen, the General Counsel for North Fort Kings GSA, and I'm here to talk this morning about defining the air quote buckets of water as we've tried to describe it in the past. So in talking about an allocation program, the first thing that we want to clarify is the different, as I call it, colors of water in the underground. Probably most would think that just everything below us is going to be set for the same allocation. But given that we have surface water supplies, we have groundwater supplies, there's different water rights associated with everything below our feet. So in defining the buckets of water, a groundwater allocation program defines the different buckets of water that make up a sustainable yield of groundwater supply and assigns the rules around using that supply, groundwater only. So the first one we have here is the native yield, which we, again, using the colors, is going to be yellow. This is groundwater naturally present in the GSA. This is what the GSA can regulate under SGMA. The next bucket we have here, again, using the colors, is blue. Surface water in the ground, which we've used as the term acronym SWIG. Return flow of surface water supplies that have been seeped into the ground. This is water that belongs to the surface water right holders. And then combining the two, we get the color green, and that adds up to your sustainable yield. So why this is important is as the North Fort King GSA embarks on rules and regulations, we will be having to allocate the native sustainable yield. Up for further discussion, not here today, but how we carry over that allocation, whether we allow transfers, what the priority of use, those are all going to be robust discussions that are be coming up in the next coming months. And that's all I have for now, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Johansson, technical consultant for the GSA, work for Provo and Pritchard Consulting Group. Aubrey mentioned about the buckets. We'll just kind of talk about what the components are that go into those buckets. So the native groundwater, which would be the portion that gets allocated, is made up of basically three components. When you think about where does groundwater come from, if you didn't have surface water, where does groundwater come from? So you've got mountain front or other natural groundwater inflow that comes into an area. You can have precipitation, and then you have seepage from local supplies from rivers and streams. Really, that's about all you've got for where groundwater naturally will come from. Surface water can be coming, the surface water in the ground that Aubrey mentioned is associated with the surface water rights holders, and those can be several different components. It can be return flow of irrigation, so you irrigate with surface water, you have some deep percolation, that stays with the surface water entity. You have canal seepage, so downstream of the river head gates, you've got seepage from the canals. Any intentional recharge that's done, any recharge basins or flood mar, which is basically over irrigation of farmland. And then there's a component of that river seepage. There's a portion that's considered natural seepage, and then there's a portion that is considered still with the surface water entity. So that portion there would be stay with that surface water in the ground component. So just thinking about surface water, so those of you that have surface water, what happens? So you have your surface water. Some of it goes to canal seepage, then you get it to your fields. You irrigate with it. Part of it gets used by the crop, part of it goes to deep percolation. And then you may also have intentional recharge activities. So that's how the surface water gets divvied up basically. And again, the GSA has no control over the surface water. The surface water rights are still with the entities that have the surface water. But those components there that are kind of highlighted, the canal seepage, the intentional recharge, and the deep percolation or return flow are the components that feed into what we're calling the SWIG, the surface water in the ground. So that's additional water that can be pumped by those that have the surface water rights. So again, as Aubrey mentioned, the sustainable yield, that's the maximum amount of water that can be withdrawn annually from a groundwater supply without causing an undesirable result. But you add those two, the yellow bucket, native groundwater allocation, the blue bucket, SWIG, gives you your green bucket, your sustainable yield. And we'll turn it over to Ronnie, and I think we'll take questions toward the end.
Morning, I'm Ronnie Samuelian, and as Alexis said, I serve as the basin point of contact with the Department of Water Resources. We're in North Fork here, but as a reminder, you're one of 7 GSAs in the Kings Basin, and the Department of Water Resources, who's regulating the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA, treats the basin as one, and we go as one, essentially. And we were submitted 7 different groundwater sustainability plans. Each GSA did a different plan, and they were approved. We were actually the first multi-GSP basin that was approved by DWR, which is good rather than being considered for probation or other requirements. So the DWR requires us to be consistent throughout our basin, that we can't just do one thing differently within each GSA. Part of the reason we believe we were approved is because of the high level of coordination and consistency we had within our groundwater sustainability plans. And that ties to the implementation of an allocation framework in that within the basin, one GSA each GSA needs to be consistent in how they're addressing the native numbers and the allocation. Not necessarily that each GSA is going to implement an allocation framework at the same time. In fact, we expect each GSA will do that at slightly different times, mainly because of the impact of folks that have significant surface water rights versus those that don't. But we do need to be consistent in how that framework or that native number was established, so that one group isn't essentially double counting or counting water that the other GSA might be considering. I think with that, I'll hand it over to Justin.
Good morning. I'm Justin, the general manager of North Fork Kings. So here again is each person has their own individual green bucket, right? And your surface water deliveries make up your total surface water supply. So for those, in the 100,000 plus acres of North Fork that do have surface water, you have to look at it as your total water supply. We talked at previous meetings about, according to our water budget, our annual overdraft is about 70,000 acre feet in North Fork Kings. And we kind of have 2 options. Previously in the Kings Subbasin, we talked about the 2 knobs that we have between, supply and demand. The reducing of groundwater pumping is an allocation. This is what the GSA has jurisdiction over, is limiting the pumping number. That's where the GSA comes in. Surface water supplies, that is you individually as a farmer, as a water district, and potentially bringing in more water. Unfortunately for us in North Fork, our average entitlement on the Kings collectively is not enough to recharge our way out of this. So we're going to have to do a mix of both. Here it is broken down into the buckets. As I said, in the yellow bucket, that's what the GSA sets a limit on. The blue bucket, there is a way that farmers can help themselves. By diverting water through the river, keeping the river full, right? Surface water districts fill up their canals and their ditches, and then ultimately their ponds, for recharge ponds. All of that is more blue water in your blue bucket. We were talking about seepage earlier, and so part of native yield is natural seepage. So as we fill the river, yes, the surface water folks get more water, but that also helps increase native sustainable yield as well. Maximizing surface water deliveries, especially in wet years. Taking deliveries earlier in the year, or maybe like recharging in the winter, pre-irrigating, and then ultimately the irrigation season, right? If we look at the calendar year and keeping the river full, recharging floodwater is huge. There's less service area restrictions when it comes to recharging floodwater. And back again, I call these the 3 Fs, right? These are some of our biggest benefits is if we fill the river, we fill the ditches, we fill the ponds, we help ourselves. The GSA is also looking at, GSA funding, working with surface water units and growers on banking and recharge projects. Currently, our leave behind rules in the GSA is a benefit to all the land within all 168,000 acres. Funding programs and incentives. Later this afternoon, our board will be looking at a groundwater recharge incentive program, essentially paying landowners roughly $2,200 an acre, up to 30 acres to facilitate building more ponds where we can. And then obviously the state, not really full of funding at the moment, but they have plans for filling up, Prop 4 that recently passed with opportunities for floodplains, habitat, and other SGMA-related projects. We hope to apply for those grants in the future. Looking at our neighbors, right? We didn't invent the concept of allocations. Everywhere kind of around us is less than an acre foot. And just kind of cutting to the chase, like currently we're in this range. Our recent kind of looking at the numbers had us at about 0.5 for a native sustainable yield, or the 2040 number as we summarize it. So in Reed Ditch, we recently did a pilot study of Watermark, our accounting features and testing the surface water deliveries reporting. And so in the future, for those of you that have registered your wells and claim your parcels within Watermark already, you'll have an account, you'll have a dashboard that's going to have your total water supply available. There's going to be a section here of surface water deliveries, right? So, this month, this, generic account received about, that's the number of acre feet. It's a little blurry from here. I can't tell if it's 50 something. And then over here, it has the breakdown of the yellow and blue buckets kind of in your account. And then you have the precipitation. So it has all of those components within each bucket is going to be on a dashboard for you to be able to see. And so one of those is precipitation. This water usage, this is where the Land IQ data is going to be reported, and which is the segue to how Land IQ fits into our Watermark system.
Need the steering wheel. Good morning. So everybody previously has been kind of talking about the supply side. How much water do I have to use? What I'm going to speak about in the next 8 or 9 slides deals with how much water was used from the field itself. We work for a number of GSAs and do this work for them, and I can't tell you how many times growers have simply said, I just want to know how much water I use. And I always start off by saying there's 2 types of use. There's applied water and there's consumed water, and they are not the same because nothing is 100% efficient. So if you apply 100 acre feet of water, you're not going to consume 100 acre feet of water. We talked about the deep perk or the return flow. A portion of what you apply is going to return back to groundwater. If you're 90% efficient, you consume 90 acre feet of that 100 acre feet of water that you applied. What we measure is the consumed part. And applied plus precipitation, that I term that as the total amount of water that a field receives. So you have 2 sources of water, applied and rainfall, and that amount of water must be greater than the consumed, or else somehow we're creating water, which would be a great thing to do, but is not possible. We come at this work from a measurement perspective. We hang our hat on everything being heavily ground truthed. I say this all the time, it gets boring to hear, but what we do is no different than you calibrating a spray rig when you care about ground speed, PSI, nozzle size, those types of things, so you don't put on too much water or too much chemical, or you don't put on too little chemical. You want to get it right. We measure things in these ground truthing stations that you see here, things like min-max temperature, precipitation, net radiation, soil moisture, those types of things, in order to calibrate our remotely sensed approaches so that we don't overestimate the demand or underestimate the demand. Neither is good. If we overestimate the demand, I'm telling you, you have to pump less or use less. If I underestimate it, I'm telling you erroneously that you can pump more, and then you would not be in compliance. So that's why we ground truth. It's harder, it's trickier, it takes more time, but it results in more accurate estimates of field-by-field evapotranspiration. We've been doing this for a while, and the red dots on this map represent where those ground truthing stations are and this is areas that we work up and down the state, and we have about 100 of them now. It's a big effort, and we're very serious about that network of stations, and that amount of ground truthing data is extremely valuable to calibrate and accurately estimate the amount of water consumed, the evapotranspiration. And I won't go into too many there, but we work with UC Davis, and the results are in other independent entities that review our work, and the results are used for various purposes: water management, fee allocation, groundwater allocation, and just overall water management activities. We deliver a few things. We deliver field-by-field ET. So we also map every single homogeneous agricultural field. So we have a boundary, hand-digitized boundary around every single field in California, and we update those field boundaries. So if you have a crop, an orchard, almonds, we know the outer edge of that, and we know what crop type it is. So it is a field-specific, not parcel, but field-specific consumption evapotranspiration estimate, and we integrate in crop type mapping as well to make things a little bit more accurate. So every field has a number, so it's at least equitable across the landscape, and our goal in ground truthing is to make it accurate across the landscape. So we'll know which field is the highest consuming field in the landscape, the lowest consuming field in the landscape, and everyone in between. Accuracy, we care a lot about accuracy, and I get this question a lot when I'm the person that says, here's how much water you're consuming. I try to stay away from the word use, but if I use the word use, I mean consumption. And so we run independent accuracy validations, set aside some of those stations, and have a number of other studies that we've performed in which we compare applied to consumed as well. We also deliver field-by-field precipitation, so we have rain gauges on all these stations, and we also integrate in other rain gauges that we trust, so that if you have all these dots on the landscape of rain gauges, you can create a continuum of rain across that landscape. And talking to a grower earlier this morning, I overheard a grower earlier this morning say, well, I got 1.6 inches over here, and I got 0.2 inches over there. And that is why you have to have a lot of those dots across the landscape so you can account for where it rained more or less. So we deliver that too on a field-by-field basis. Crop type, I talked about that. I won't go into that in any detail, but if you know crop type, you can bin the analysis by crop type. Not just saying this is the highest consuming field and this is the lowest consuming field, but this is the highest almond consuming field and this is the lowest almond consuming field, so you can narrow things in and make things a little bit more accurate. And perhaps the last and I think most important deliverable that we provide is grower and GSA support. So as you are looking at your ET numbers in the platform that Justin was showing before. If you have a question, you want to discuss them, we pick up the phone and we're happy to work with any and every grower that wants to talk about it. And we do that on all of the GSAs and districts that we work for. Okay, that's me.
Okay, on that note, we're at the most important part. Make sure you're writing down those questions. Throughout the presentation that I'm about to give, you'll be able to pass those over. We'll have PMP staff on either side. But this was really the reason we went so quick through these is to give you the opportunity to ask your questions. So just a little bit about outreach and engagement and what you can expect over the coming months. If you have not signed up for our email list, please do so. It helps us stay connected with you, send the information out, make sure you're aware of upcoming events and any changes. Like we've said, this is how we're calculating it, but we haven't fully published the number. So when all of that comes out, you'll want to be informed. Next, follow our new LinkedIn account. We're doing lots of exciting things at the GSA, and it's important to us that we're able to communicate with you all. We are doing video FAQ explainers. You can find those on our website or our YouTube page. And any FAQ, frequently asked questions that we don't get answered today or you think of later, send those in to us so that we can make a video. If we're getting it a lot, we found it helpful to explain it. And then you can always attend our board and committee meetings. Those are public, and you can contact us directly, help@northforkkings.org, or substitute that help with mine or Justin's name, and we're happy to help you. So what comes next? November 12th, we'll have the grower-to-grower meeting. We'll be setting up round tables, providing lunch, allowing you to have peer-to-peer conversations about how you're adapting your business operations to the coming allocation. So you'll be taking all of the information that you've received over this workshop and the last workshop, and really truly able to have the tough conversations about what you're going to do going forward. So I said that we had the FAQ videos, so we have some new ones out. It's our goal to publish some before every workshop. So the 3 we have out right now is, does crop type determine my allocation? Do I need a meter? And watermark your water accounting tool. So you have the QR codes in your packet that you can use, or I saw the gentleman in the back taking a picture. You can scan the QR code right there. And then the allocation webpage, we've got that up and live. All resources regarding allocation can be found on that page. The handouts you've received, you can find any of those if you lose those on your allocation page. Okay, so we'll go ahead and have you guys pass those questions to the side. We'll take a moment to gather those, and then we'll get started. Panelists, we have more water coming for you too. Yeah, and you can fill them out as we go on, and then at the end, if we still have time for live, we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, I think the first question should go to Justin. And if I'm wrong, then you can share the mic with your fellow panelists. What is the leave behind to benefit all the lands? Does it benefit the whole GSA?
The leave behind at the moment. So our recharge leave behind in our rules and regs is if your surface water unit does not have a recharge policy, the catch-all policy is 90-10. So it's a leave behind of 10% for the GSA at the moment. Only Riverdale ID and Laguna irrigation districts have recharge policies, so all the other surface water units within do not have one, so they would default to the 90-10 percentage at the moment.
Okay. This one kind of goes regarding land IQ, but I think that, you'll probably need to pass it back and forth between Joel and Kevin and Justin. So if land IQ estimation of water usage considerably differs from measured water by landowner, will the calibrated flow meters, will the GSA make adjustments on the account?
Short answer, yes. Our current policy within the GSA is land IQ is the default. If the landowner wishes to supply flow meter data to counter that. We will accept it, work on it, and take that data. That's our current system.
Yeah, that's not uncommon in other GSAs too, and I think it provides the grower a lot of flexibility, not only to learn from both the consumed and applied part of components of water, but also just if they prefer to use a meter. The other GSAs have pretty strict guidelines on calibration of that meter, installation of that meter, maintaining that meter, and such. So, yeah.
As I mentioned earlier too, the GSA is working on developing or fleshing out its current rules and regulations, and the idea would be for any allocation or any pricing, any action taken by the GSA, that there would be an appeals process, that any landowner could bring information to the board to explain why there might be a unique circumstance going on with your land in particular, and the board can absolutely react to that. So there will always be a pathway forward for the landowners to speak directly to board members and make adjustments if there are errors along the way.
Thank you.
Alexis. And just to add to it a little bit, so when you think about an allocation, there's two different ways basically you can do an allocation. You can either do it on consumed water or you can do it on extracted or metered water. And they're two different numbers because the extracted water includes that portion of deep percolation that you get from irrigation. We're basing our allocation on consumed water at this point. So if someone did want to have meters in and challenge the land IQ, we would obviously definitely look at that. But we do have to look at, those are two different numbers, metered water and consumed water. So there is an adjustment that we're going to have to look at and factor in to make that switch. And it depends really on largely the irrigation system and management of that system and how much of that deep percolation occurs. So there is definitely a process to do that, but it will be a little bit of something to figure out as we go forward, because it's not just a straight comparison of the two numbers, because they are different.
Thank you. Before I ask this next question, I want to direct your attention to your packets. You do have the sustainable yield handout in there that explains the breakdown of the calculation, and Kevin kind of touched on it right now. But Kevin, the question is, how will the SWIG get calculated, and how will you account for soil type with SWIG?
So for the most part, the SWIG number is going to come from the surface water entity. The river seepage portion will be calculated and then allocated according to how the surface water entity says it should be allocated to those users. Any recharge, intentional recharge, would be a number that comes directly from the surface water entity. The same with the canal seepage. The one portion that that will be a little bit of a question mark, to be honest, is that return flow component of the surface water irrigation. To do it correctly, you really would want to know what crop is being irrigated and the irrigation system that's being used for that, because there's obviously a different amount of deep percolation if you have drip irrigation on almonds versus flood irrigation of corn, for instance. Unless the surface water entities are able to tell us how that water, where that water gets applied and to what field and irrigation type, we're going to have to make a average estimation, 20% deep percolation or something like that. So that's a piece that ideally we get that information from the surface water entities. We may not be able to, because there are multiple turnouts, or there are turnouts that serve multiple fields sometimes, multiple crops. And so it's not always clean to get that information. So that's the one piece that's going to need to be a little bit of a calculation. But basically, everything will come back from information from the surface water entity.
As Kevin was mentioning, to get as accurate as possible, this is why we've got a few features, some added features to Watermark. So as you familiarize yourself with Watermark, where you've registered your property, your APN number, we're also kind of adding some buttons to, like, you can get your crop to the best possible option there, so that you can get more accurate data for that. Register your recharge projects via Watermark. I think we had about 25 recharge projects in 2023, right? So those are going to be uploaded into Watermark. And so familiarizing yourself with Watermark and making sure that all of your correct, APN numbers, fields, recharge projects helps a more accurate number for your individual account.
And I'll repeat what I said earlier. When using we appreciate getting accurate meter readings because we compare that to the consumed amount of water, or the applied amount of water to the consumed amount of water. So applied versus consumed. But we've done that over a number of years with some cooperating growers, and have found certain times, like over 2 years, the received water, again, the sum of precipitation and applied water, was below the consumed water. But that happened more than 1 year. Why could that? And all of the other orchards that we were monitoring, the consumed water was less than the total received water, which it should be. And so the same model, same orchard, same soil type, same planting year, same density. What was the problem? The problem was that the meter was off. The meter was reading low, and they went in and calibrated and found that out. So ET can also be used as a check backwards on meters. But it's, with ET at least, and we, as I mentioned before, we want to be equitable across a landscape. So everybody is treated equitably, and the ground truthing is to make it accurate in addition.
And I apologize, the lawyer's going to try to do math now, and I'm up here with all these experts. So, but just to provide a real simple illustration, because getting back to this question, I know it helps me in my mind when we start talking about the accounting. If, for example, we go to the surface water entity that says they delivered 10 acre feet of water to your parcel, Joel comes back and says the consumption is 8 acre feet, that 2 acre feet then stays in your account. And so that, I think that's an easy check on, as Kevin was just kind of describing, there's a lot of complication in the return flow, the soil type, but in using Joel's approach with Land IQ, I think it really simplifies the process and is to the benefit of the landowner.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and pass the microphone to Ronnie. You might want to share this question with Justin. If one of the 7 GSAs in the basin fails to reach sustainability, does the entire basin fail? And how do we prevent this outcome?
Yeah, good question. I think right now, fully, the basin as a whole, DWR has been very clear that the basin as a whole will be treated. So one GSA will potentially bring down the whole basin. However, there's a little bit of precedent if you've tracked in Thule where what would happen? DWR would say you're not in compliance and we're going to kick you to the state board. And in one situation down there, we have what's, without getting into a lot of details, good actor, bad actor has been identified in one other basin. And they're still under state board consideration and involvement, but they're not subject to some of the requirements that are happening in other areas. So I think the answer is it's possible. We don't know for sure that they could cause the entire basin to be pushed towards state board consideration. But within that, potentially, hopefully, there would be and has been consideration of a GSA that is reaching sustainability not being subject to some of those same requirements. I should say, we have another GM for one of our GSAs that says, look, smart people are trying to put numbers together, their estimates, and everybody's targeting what we're going to do. But at the end of the day, the wells are the lie detector. If the water table's going down, we haven't reached sustainability, and we need to figure out why and get there. That's how the state's looking at it. But fortunately, at least we're not in front of the state board right now in the Kings, and have a good push to try and keep all GSAs from moving forward.
Yeah, I'll just add, or maybe say it in a different way, but the things to remember are, yes, it's a subbasin as a whole that gets like recommended potentially for probation. And then when we get there, or let me say also, sustainability is key, but there's also the 6 undesirable results that each GSA has to account for. And so then, if we go to probation, then it kind of becomes like Lord of the Flies in every GSA for themselves to prove why they didn't have the undesirable results or why they are sustainable. And, you know, unfortunately, right, that's where like the major cost really kicks in, because then you're spending money on, you know, more experts to defend yourself in front of the state water board. And so we've had, I'd say, the privilege of being in a conditionally approved subbasin at the moment. We're revising our GSP to maintain that status, and we've gotten to see what's happening everywhere else. I think, you know, we do have to tip our cap over to the folks in Tulare Lake subbasin. I think they're, you know, the landowner lawsuit against the state water board has kind of put some things in flux, and the state is kind of, you know, they have to figure out how they're going to enforce all this and everything else, and that has, I think, bought some of us some time. But the short answer to that question was yes, that one GSA can kind of put us in front of the state board.
Thank you. So this one is some simplified numbers. Once a groundwater allocation is in place and your specific area is limited to 1 acre-foot, and we only get a half an acre-foot of surface water from our district, does that mean you can only pump 1 acre-foot?
Say those numbers again, if the...
Your allocation is 1 acre-foot, your surface water is a half an acre-foot, and can you only pump 1 acre-foot?
So the allocation is the limit. And then through our rules and regs, there will be fees associated with going over that limit. And then also on our accounting system, if you have more surface water deliveries, right, and you applied more surface water and you pumped less, because of your SWIG, you might have extra credits to pump against, and then you might net, you would pump over that limit, but you would probably net out 0 or more potentially.
Okay. Maybe. We'll see. If I think I understood the question correctly, if the GSA allocation, which here we would be allocating native sustainable yield, if that were 1 acre-foot per acre, if you receive deliveries of surface water of 0.5, that would not count against your native sustainable yield allocation. So surface water, totally separate. Whatever you get from the surface water entity, that's going to be a different set based on whatever water right you have there. But all we are allocating is the native sustainable yield at the GSA. However, as Justin mentioned, and with using Land IQ, we do need to account for that surface water so that we can back into any groundwater you've consumed.
Yeah. Basically, your yellow bucket limit is 1, right? So you can pump your blue water, you can use your surface water deliveries. Everyone has a green cup. Everyone has yellow water in their green cup. Not everyone has blue water. I can only regulate the yellow water.
somebody brought this up to me. This is the sheet that I was talking about with the calculation. It's in your packet. So when he says yellow, you can find that on the document, and that is what he is referring to. Okay. I know that Kevin has a lot of numbers in his head. We'll test that theory right now and see if he has this one. What is the historic amount of native yield going back 70 years?
Can I pass?
Yeah.
Or can I phone a friend?
We can phone a friend. If you ask this question, then just find us after and we'll get you the answer to it. I'll hand it to Becca. Thank you. That was a true test of your knowledge. You didn't fail yet. Okay.
Make up anything.
Let's see. I am totally dependent on groundwater pumping. No ditch. Liberty District almond grower. What is the GSA going to do for me and others in the same situation?
Essentially, so groundwater dependent, you only have the yellow water in the green cup. The GSA sets a limit on what that is. And then within the rules and regs, there's options for transfers and carryovers. And so it'll be a kind of a numbers game on your acreage, your total water supply, and transfers, potentially buying and selling of native sustainable yield credits from other landowners would be an option to you. And then I think that's it. I mean, other than, also potentially, right, if all 168, if the GSA were to buy water from surface water districts and apply that seepage across the boundary is another way to potentially add to the equation. But I'd say those importing more water, strategically fallowing and moving credits, potentially buying and selling of credits, a water market essentially, are the tools in your toolbox.
Thank you. This one is probably going to be a past question that you guys are going to have to share the mic. So I'll ask it, and maybe Justin, you can start. When water pumping allocations are implemented, can a farmer fallow some fields and use their water allocation in other fields? Do their fields all have to be continuous or in the same irrigation district?
Kind of with what I just said, those things would be in the rules and regs that we create. But, I think the GSA board does want to have a system that allows for, within the boundary at least, we've talked about potentially, right, if you were moving water, on paper from one corner of the GSA to the other, there'd probably be some sort of reduction or leave behind. It wouldn't be one for one, but that would go into the rules and regs and discussed probably at the grower advisory committee and the policy committee of what works best. So potentially, yeah.
And again, another great topic for upcoming rules and regs discussion. But in other areas, I can say the way that the boards have approached it is the allocation does go with the fee title owner. So for your online account, it would be the same fee title owner with all parcels associated with that fee title owner. We can look at also grouping those. I know there's lots of different varieties of folks having estate planning, different trusts set up where there is common ownership, even if it may not be in the exact same name. And then within the GSA, that allocation would be shared amongst those lands. So it would be grouping all of your ownership into one account, receiving a total allocation, getting that consumption on all of those parcels and a sum total balance. Again, subject to future discussion, official action by the North Fork Kings, but that is how I've seen other areas do it.
Thank you. So this is kind of a reiteration of the surface water in the ground, but we're going to answer all your questions today. For private ditch stock shareholders, will they have full access to their pre-share entitlement, including losses, or will their losses be distributed across the subbasin/GSA?
So if we could, I would say this would be variables in the blue bucket. So if a surface water rights holder, has ditch stock, right? A portion of the blue bucket is canal seepage. So those are your canal losses, essentially. A portion of the river seepage is in the blue bucket. A portion of river seepage is in the yellow bucket. So it's kind of a piece of each one. So because a portion of it is river seepage, like 100% of your losses are not recouped. A portion of it is in the yellow bucket. But most of it comes back to the ditch stockholder.
And just to add on to that a little bit, so like the canal seepage that Justin mentioned, so that's the losses in the ditch. The surface water unit will have those numbers. They get the headgate diversions from the Kings River Water Association. The mutual canal company knows what they've delivered to the field, so they know what the losses are within the ditch. Then it'll be up to that surface water entity to allocate who gets how much of that seepage number. Largely, I would guess it would be by who's running at certain times, but that's going to be up to each surface water entity to determine that and provide that information to the GSA.
And then I think part of, like with Ronnie's presentation on the water allocation framework in the subbasin, one of those variables in the GSP water budget is seepage. So we kind of have to agree as a subbasin on who has what seepage number, so we're not double counting water. And so in my mind, right, the subbasin's going to agree on a seepage number. I have one. And then as Kevin said, with all the ditch stock losses, canal losses and such, that is a number reported by the surface water district. So they're going to give me a number for those variables. This grower has this much. This grower has this much. So I'm going to take the subbasin number, I'm going to take the surface water district numbers, and I'm going to take a percentage of it and put it in the yellow bucket. And then, so most of those numbers coming from your surface water reporting is going to go in the blue bucket.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and pass the mic over to Joel. Does fallowed ground consume water? And what about precipitation on fallowed ground?
Yeah, the only part of water that hits fallow ground is of the total of received water is the precipitation component, right? So if it's fallow, we're assuming you're not irrigating. So the only water that field will receive is precipitation. And yes, we measure the ET of precipitation. And that is a component of kind of the whole water balance. And I'm suspecting that, and I think Justin mentioned it when he was showing the tool, there's a precipitation component and then there's a total consumption component. So yes, it does.
I have a feeling after my comments, you're going to be having a workshop on the rules and regulations, Justin. But on that point, another topic for your rules and regs is how to handle that fallowed land and possibly create policies to ensure that there isn't any inadvertent, I'll call it dings to the landowners as a result of fallowing ground. Obviously, if you are, that's something I think the GSA would want to encourage. If the goal is to get to sustainable yield and reduce consumption, we don't want to penalize the grower because of the ET methodology by fallowing land.
Thank you. Go ahead and pass the microphone over to Justin. Will meters be required on all wells, even if you choose to use Land IQ?
Meters are not mandatory at the moment. If you, what I would recommend is familiarize yourself with Watermark. When we get to the point where you're looking at the Land IQ data, like, see if it makes sense to you or not. And then for those of you that already have meters and you want to use that data, that's perfectly fine to come to us and do like the calculations that Kevin was mentioning earlier. But at this moment in time, meters are not a requirement within the GSA.
Thank you. How can we keep the rivers full when so much water is leaving the subbasin?
Should the lawyer take this one? I think with the way I've looked at it is that by acknowledging the blue bucket, it incentivizes, all users to kind of keep water in the river, right? Because now you're getting credit back for your losses. And then the allocation prevents, someone else from pumping your credits out. And so that's where I think where the allocation and the acknowledgement of SWIG incentivizes growers to keep water in the river. Yeah.
Thank you.
Or Kevin has a...
Sigma obviously has changed the landscape of things. Historically, I think a lot of people tried to keep their water up in Pine Flat for use during the summer to optimize their summer irrigation season. What has happened historically at times then when we've had a lot of storage, carried over storage to try to carry for the next year, then we've lost it in a big winter out the north end. I think we need to be thinking, and I know everybody is starting to, but we need to be thinking about groundwater and surface water as your total water. And I think part of that's going to involve potentially running your water a little sooner, keeping your storage account maybe a little bit lower at times to try to keep from getting that storage account too high and spilling that water. We get a year like 2023, there's nothing you can do about it when you have a huge year like that. But in above average years, I think there's an opportunity potentially to basically reoperate the river, the reservoir a little bit, take that water out a little bit sooner, keep it in the river. With these credits, you'll generate water. You're not going to lose it, but we also aren't losing it out the back end on a wet year. So it's just something, it's a process. I know it's a different way of thinking a little bit, but I think it's what we have to start working toward.
This question is for Aubrey. Have there been discussions that Sigma could be viewed as a governmental take, therefore requiring compensation to landowners by the state?
Yes. Yes. No, I think in all seriousness, that's been a discussion since Sigma was passed. I will say, speaking as a landowner, I'll say, unfortunately, the GSA is a regulatory agency. And so our job here as a GSA is to curtail overdraft pumping and get everyone on a path to sustainability by avoiding those 6 undesirable results that Justin mentioned before. So, as I also say, anybody can sue over anything. So, I can't sit here saying today that with the adoption of the rules and regulations by the GSA and an allocation methodology that we are not going to be seeing any of that in the future for any GSA in the state of California. But I think the purpose and goal here by this GSA specifically is to make sure we keep as many landowners as business as possible, not have a claim of takings, work with the landowners, and maximize the water supply that you all have to the benefit of everyone in the subbasin.
Thank you. Probably Kevin. We're talking a lot about cropland. How is water allocated and accounted for on dairy and food processor operations?
I guess probably have not fully defined that, but the way the groundwater allocation would work, at least I believe within North Fork what's been discussed, it was we calculate for the total GSA how much native sustainable yield the GSA has, and that's being done at the subbasin level for each GSA, and that's a different number for each GSA within the subbasin, largely because of the precipitation component. But each GSA will have their number, say, of the sustainable yield, and then that needs to get then divided among the landowners, and there's different ways to divide it. It could be gross acreage, it could be irrigated acreage, it could be amount of pumping, historical pumping. There's different ways to divide that. What the North Fork Kings GSA has discussed, and I believe is probably the most equitable, is across the gross acreage. So each acreage on a gross parcel acreage gets that allocation, so that whatever our sustainable yield number is for the GSA gets spread across the 168,000 acres. So any dairy land or food processing or cities or anybody would get their share of that allocation amount.
Also, specifically for dairies, currently we have in our rules and regs right now is we're using the Four Creeks study that I don't know if that was Delta View or MPC that sponsored, or if Four Creeks just did it. But Four Creeks Engineering had done a study for use on dairy facilities, net use, and that's what we're currently using.
Thank you. Go ahead and keep the microphone. Is the government planning to build storage? And I'll just add, or can you tell us what the GSA is doing for storage, recharge?
Well, for the GSA specifically, this afternoon, this evening, we're going to launch our pilot program for landowner recharge incentives. And again, that's with the goal of trying to get 300 acres. We're up to 30 acres. The GSA will pay $22.50 per acre if you meet the requirements of the program. The policy committee will be talking about it at 4 p.m. and the board will be voting on it at 5:30 if you're interested. Another thing with projects is the GSA is a public entity subject to prevailing wage, and so any project we do would have a higher cost and would have to benefit all 168,000 acres. So it's not like we could partner with just one person or one surface water unit to recharge. They are recharging their surface water into the ground, so those projects make more sense for the water district to do. And then as far as the state, no, the state's not planning any storage projects. I'm almost 40 years old, and I just feel like I've grown up in politics to where we're always asking for more storage and haven't really got it. Enlargement. Kings River does have an effort to raise Pine Flat, but the state, I believe, does not have any storage plans.
Thank you. We have 2 questions left, so if you had any additional questions, make sure to write them down, and then we'll open it up to live questions if you have them. Why are landowners hit with all these restrictions when they should be asking builders who are buying farmland for houses and communities?
Well, I don't disagree with the sentiment, but unfortunately, Sigma was passed in 2014, and this is the, this is what the state has created, and then we have to hopefully solve these internally. This is what local control looks like, and it's having us to decide these things, and it gets tough and it's messy.
I think I would just add that the cities are required to comply with Sigma as well. So I can't attest to any specific example, but this is the process that they need to go through with annexations through LAFCO, their water use, their water consumption. Any new development needs to be checking all of the same boxes and should be checking more than even ag use at this point. Now, whether or not that's happening, I can't say any specific example again, but they are required to comply with Sigma.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Justin. Allocated surface water from Crescent and Stinson Canal will be added on our watermark account, correct? Or will the landowner need to request the adjustment?
So currently, after going through the Reed Ditch pilot study, we have determined that we need kind of a new data entry system, and we're going to be working with, we're basically going to be doing it at the ditch tender level. And so it would be able to enter data directly from the turnout. And so Crescent and Stinson, all the mutual water companies and the irrigation districts will be part of this development of this new ditch tender interface to enter that data. And so Crescent and Stinson will be reporting water with everyone else.
Okay. Is there any other questions that people would like to ask? If you'd like to ask them live, please hold and raise your hand and I'll come to you with the mic. No? Okay. That's the end. Thank you all for coming. Again, we have our next workshop on November 12th. Make sure you sign up for the interested parties email list, and we'll send all the details through there. But that will be a peer-to-peer grower-to-grower exercise. So please come, bring your neighbors, bring your friends. It's important that you all have the opportunity to discuss it together. Thank you.